Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Luke Driscoll, one of the partners at CCS Fundraising. Welcome to the first episode of something we're calling 5 Leaders, 5 Questions, 5 Minutes. This is a mini webinar series where we explore the challenges that nonprofit organizations have handled in the face of crisis and how we can apply those lessons learned to what we're facing today amid the public health challenges we're having, as well as the related financial instability of the markets. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge that this current situation is much different than previous times in our history, such as the aftermath of 9/11, the financial crash of 2008, natural disasters such as Hurricane Katrina and Superstorm Sandy. In this case, we're dealing with both financial uncertainty that's coupled by a global public health emergency, and that's all further compounded by the need for social distancing. This is truly unprecedented times for all of us, but we often can learn lessons from the past to guide us in the present. Our donors and our supporters want to know how these issues are impacting the organizations that we care about and what we can do to help and what they can do to help. Our hope is this mini webinar will allow us to listen to what executives leading organizations did during these challenging times and how we might adapt to meet our current challenges. Today, we are joined by Barbara Deutsch, Chief Executive Officer at Landscape Architecture Foundation in Washington, D.C. Barb has been the CEO at LAF for more than 10 years and is a landscape architect herself. She's unique in that she's served both in the nonprofit as well as the for-profit space with over 10 plus years at IBM. Thank you for joining us today, Barbara.
Thank you, Luke. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, let's dive right into it. So one of the first questions that we have is, as lead executive at your organization, what's your role in fundraising?
Sure. Through different times of the organization's growth, I've been involved in different ways, but certainly I'm absolutely involved in overseeing strategy and providing input and actually making the calls and maintaining the relationships with our donors. Large donors through personal contact and all constituents by overseeing general communications for the organization. As a nonprofit leader, we have 2 directives to both ensure the financial health and well-being of the organization and to also achieve the mission of the organization. And if we don't have the funds, then there's no mission. So certainly fundraising is a primary responsibility of my role as CEO and one that I enjoy.
Well, that's great. And so let's kind of just dive back into it. Our next question goes to sort of when you arrived at LAF, arrived at a very interesting time, because when you arrived at LAF, it was right at the beginning of that financial crisis in 2008. How did that impact your earliest days at the organization?
That was certainly an interesting time. I'm putting that in quotes. It was very challenging. It was the worst recession since the Great Depression, and particularly acute for the building sector, and therefore the Landscape Architecture Foundation, because we serve designers and builders of the environment. So I had just started at LAF, like you said, and I thought, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? The work of landscape architecture is inextricably tied to development. So I think the key advice that was given to me by leaders who had been in the business for decades and gone through other recessions, though not as severe as right now for the reasons that you cited, Luke, earlier on, but certainly challenging. They said, Barbara, whatever you do, don't waste a good recession. This is the time to retool and get ready for when things get better, because they will, and they will be different. And so you need to be prepared to, I'm quoting, drink out of the fire hose when we do get out of it. So it was quite a formidable challenge. And as many of you know who were nonprofit leaders at that time, it was a challenge to both keep the wheels on the bus during this immediate crisis, as well as plan for the future as best we could speculate what that new future might be.
Great point. And that kind of is a nice transition to kind of where we are today. So our next question is really saying, you know, we have this public health emergency that's also coupled by the kind of instability in the markets. So that's a little different than 2008, maybe more challenging. So how are you all approaching fundraising now?
I think we took a lot of lessons from 10 years ago, and certainly the campaign we ran with CCS coming out of 2008 financial and housing crisis. And I think the key thing that we learned, and this is consistent with my marketing background, is just to talk with people and listen and be real. And we don't know all the answers and what the future will be, but we will figure it out and can imagine the possibilities. And I think this is actually an opportunity to work together and get through this even stronger and develop a shared vision for what that new future could look like. So maybe we can't meet in person like we like to or prefer to and have fun to do, but by at least talking with donors on the phone or through certainly video conferencing, which now I prefer seeing their face, getting used to these new platforms. So by talking with them, it's an opportunity to reconfirm our shared interests and values, to share tactics for getting through this moment, and share hope and inspiration for the future that we'd like to see that brings us together through the organization. And
that's great.
And as we said earlier, this disruption is, like you said, is like the likes of which we've never experienced before. I think that at other times we've seen people bring out their best selves. So we are seeing a real coming together around this common experience because it's affecting everyone everywhere, as you had said. And so far, donors have been eager to have these conversations and to help.
Sure. Now, not giving away your secret sauce or anything, but the next question is just curious, is there any particular strategy that you might be using for, certainly you have different component parts to your, who are your donor base. You have the landscape architects themselves, and then you certainly have the folks in the building industry who work with them. Is there any particular strategy that you're using at this time with your donors?
It's kind of back to the basics. But I guess, yes, we are finding some strategies particularly effective. I feel like we're running our own campaign, not like the formal big campaign, but just one that says, okay, what's our plan? Let's get our plan together. Let's execute it. And so we're calling on all our major donors and checking in with them to see how they're doing and what they're doing and learning from them to help inform our strategy at this time. So we're also asking them, we're making asks of them to reminding them that we've been through this before, and because we work together and as lead investors in the organization, that we came through even stronger than before. So we're asking them to reconfirm their interest in LEF and their commitments through their pledges and contributions, and if there's any way that they can look at their future pledge payments and bring them in sooner to provide help if we need it with their operations, we're asking them to do that. We're also asking them to remove any restrictions on their contributions to restricted funds, to ease those assets so they could serve as collateral for lines of credit or loans, and potentially as well as our operations to get us through this time. Even these opportunities with the CARES Act, some of them require collateral or other assets being more liquid. So having help with them with the restrictions has been helpful. And I mean, the goal of this, right, is to get through the next 9 months, hopefully not longer, but to protect their past investments in the mission of the organization. So we also came up with some new opportunities to invest in case they are in a position to do so, opportunities that would add value to them to reach their target audience, and opportunities for LEF to generate incremental revenue.
Fantastic. And then just kind of our final question, you've gave some great advice all throughout this and some real-time examples to people, but is there one little final bit of advice you'd want to share with your kind of fellow executives and volunteer leaders how to kind of tackle today's challenges?
Yes, I have to say, we did take a cue from CCS, and Luke did not put me up to this for those listening, but actually that webinar that you held, that was 2 to 3 weeks ago, we thought was really helpful in terms of a structure to help give perspective. And we've hosted webinars since then of our leaders that has been really helpful to constituents. And I think that's what's needed. We need tools for the immediate situation, and I think people are also looking for perspective and hope and insight. And yes, we're going to get out of this. We've gone through hard times before. You've been there when the going got tough, but we did it together. We can do it again, and this is an opportunity to prepare for a new and better future and come out stronger than before because we work together.
Well, that's great. And just to wrap things up, I want to say thank you, Barbara, for your advice and time today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Wonderful. And again, just as you said, speed usually wins in these situations, about communication and speed. So making sure we talk to everybody and take the lessons we've learned and we apply them to our current situation and we adapt. So we want to thank everybody for listening today to 5 Leaders, 5 Questions, 5 Minutes. And we hope you'll join us for our next installment. Thank you and have a successful day.